If you see a man on the street stabbing himself with a dagger, you think the man's crazy. That's exactly what men who watch pornography do. Only thing, that dagger is not visible. They ruin their mind. The mind becomes polluted. They don't get anything from the Bible when they read it. They can't even concentrate on their work. They are destroying themselves. But they say, I get pleasure out of hurting myself. What would you think of a man who's stabbing himself with a dagger and say, I get a lot of pleasure out of this? What shall we say? That's how fools that the devil makes people into fools. But when you, for example, you gossip against somebody, do you gossip? Speak evil of somebody behind their back? There you're hurting somebody else. You're spoiling somebody else's reputation. Now, if you see a person coming drunk into this building, staggering in the building, drunk, you say, boy, how can he come here to this church? But let me tell you something, he has hurt only himself. But some brother or sister comes here who's a gossiper. We don't think of him or her as a bad sinner, do we? Oh, gossip, that everybody does. But that gossiper is worse than that drunkard. Because that drunkard has only hurt himself, but this gossiper has hurt somebody else. Which category are you? You think that drunkard is worse than you? I tell you in Jesus' name, you gossiper, you're worse than that drunkard, because he's committing a Genesis 3 sin, and you're committing a Genesis 4 sin. He's hurt himself with his drinking habit, and you hurt somebody else with your gossip. Always distinguish between Genesis 3 sins and Genesis 4 sins. Sins where you hurt only yourself, and sins where you've hurt somebody else. And most Christians don't think that the sins with which they've hurt others are serious. They despise people who smoke and drink. I'll tell you honestly, I'd rather have a smoker and a drunkard in this church than a gossiper. Any day. I hope he'll give up his smoking and drinking, but he's far better than the gossiper. And CFC is probably the only church where you will hear such a statement, that a smoker and a drunkard is better than a gossiper. Because that man's hurting himself. Of course, he shouldn't do it. But this other person's hurting others. How many of you speak evil of others and hurt them, spoil their reputation? You may be speaking evil of your mother-in-law. Okay. That's also gossip. Whenever you hurt another person with your words or any other way, I want to say to you in Jesus' name, you are committing the sin of Cain. I don't want to conclude on that note. It says here, your brother's blood, verse 10, is crying to me from the ground. You know, when the blood was lying there on the ground, which Cain had shed Abel's blood, and the blood was crying out to God. You know what the blood was crying out to God? The blood had a voice. God is saying, that blood is crying out to me.